The moment you stop caring is not the moment you become cold. It is the moment you stop bleeding. Buddhism does not teach you to cling harder, to love louder, or to prove your worth through suffering. It teaches you something far more dangerous to your pain: non-attachment. Most of your suffering is not caused by what happened. It is caused by how tightly you are still holding on. You replay words. You wait for apologies. You carry expectations that were never promised. And then you wonder why your chest feels heavy and your mind never rests. The Buddha was brutally clear about this. Suffering begins where attachment begins, and healing begins the moment attachment ends. Let us break this illusion carefully. 7 lessons, no comfort, only truth. 1. Attachment is not love. You were taught from a very young age that caring deeply makes you good, loyal, and noble. That if something hurts, it must mean it mattered. That if you suffer for someone, it proves the depth of your love. Society reinforces this constantly. Movies glorify obsession. Songs romanticize longing. Pain is framed as evidence of sincerity. Buddhism cuts through this illusion without mercy. It does not praise suffering. It does not reward clinging. And it does not confuse attachment with love. Attachment is not love. Attachment is fear, pretending to be love. Fear of losing someone. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being replaced. When fear enters, love quietly leaves, even if the words stay the same. True love, in the Buddhist sense, is spacious. It is calm. It does not tighten the chest or race the mind. It does not beg reality to stay the same. It does not panic at change. Love wishes well-being without ownership. Attachment does the opposite. Attachment grips. It watches closely. It monitors tone, timing, distance, and response. It needs reassurance. It needs guarantees. It needs the other person to behave a certain way so you can feel safe inside yourself. That is not love. That is dependency. When you cling to people, outcomes, or even identities, you are not practicing compassion. You are demanding permanence from something that is impermanent by nature. Buddhism teaches impermanence as a fundamental truth of existence. Everything changes. Relationships change. Feelings change. People change. Even you change. Attachment refuses to accept this. It says, stay the same. It says, do not leave. It says, do not change, because I cannot handle it. This is why attachment hurts. Not because the world is cruel, but because you are asking it to violate its own nature. Love allows freedom. Attachment demands control. Love says, I care about your well-being, even if it means change. Attachment says, I care about my comfort, even if it traps you. This is where many people become confused. They believe control is care. They believe constant thinking is devotion. They believe anxiety is intimacy. But Buddhism exposes this clearly. When your caring creates suffering, it is no longer love. Notice how attachment feels in the body. It is tight, restless, heavy. Your mind loops. You replay conversations. You anticipate loss. You prepare defenses. You scan for signs. None of this is peaceful. None of this is kind to you. Love, on the other hand, feels open. It breathes. It allows uncertainty without collapsing. This is why the Buddha taught non-attachment, not emotional numbness. Non-attachment does not mean you stop feeling. It means you stop clinging. You stop turning love into a survival strategy. When you expect what cannot last to last, disappointment is guaranteed. When you expect people to fill the spaces only you can fill, suffering becomes inevitable. You are not hurt because you loved too much. You are hurt because you expected permanence where there was none. The moment you stop caring in the attached sense, the needing, the chasing, the proving, something profound happens. Your heart does not harden, it softens. The tension releases. The desperate urgency dissolves. Softness is not weakness in Buddhism. Softness is wisdom. It is the mind no longer fighting reality. You stop gripping. And when you stop gripping, pain loosens its hold. Think of attachment like holding sand in your hand. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away, and the more your hand aches. When you open your palm, the sand can rest there naturally. You are not forcing it to stay, you are allowing it to be. This is how Buddhism teaches love. You do not own people. You do not own outcomes. You do not own moments. You experience them, and then you let them pass. When you stop caring in the sense of possession and control, you gain something far more valuable than reassurance: inner stability. Your peace no longer depends on someone else's behavior. Your worth no longer rises and falls with attention or affection. This is the first step of healing, not becoming indifferent, not becoming cold, but becoming free. Because love without attachment does not destroy you. Attachment disguised as love always will. 2. Expectation is the root of disappointment. Most of your emotional pain does not come from what people do. It comes from what you expected them to do. Buddhism treats expectation not as hope, but as a hidden demand placed on reality. The moment you expect, you create an internal contract. You assume the world will behave according to your preferences, your timing, your values, and your unspoken rules. Reality never signs that contract. Expectation feels innocent because it hides itself well. You do not say, "I demand." You say, "I thought." You say, "I assumed." You say, "I believed they would." But underneath every expectation is entitlement, the belief that things should unfold in a certain way because you invested, cared, waited, or endured. Buddhism exposes this clearly. Suffering does not arise because life is unfair. Suffering arises because the mind insists that life should be different from what it is. The Buddha identified craving as the source of suffering, and expectation is one of its quietest forms. You crave a specific outcome, a specific response, a specific version of someone, and when reality fails to deliver, disappointment follows automatically. Disappointment is not an event, it is a reaction. It is the gap between expectation and reality. You expected loyalty, so change felt like betrayal. You expected consistency, so distance felt like rejection. You expected understanding, so silence felt like disrespect. In each case, the pain did not come from the action itself. It came from the collision between what was and what you believed should have been. Buddhism teaches radical acceptance, not because acceptance is passive, but because resistance is exhausting. When you expect, you resist impermanence. You resist uncertainty. You resist the truth that people are not fixed objects, but constantly changing processes shaped by their own fears, desires, and limitations. Expectation freezes people in time. It says, "Remain who you were when I felt safe." But no one can do that, not even you. This is why expectation poisons relationships. You stop seeing the person in front of you and start reacting to the version you imagined. You listen less and interpret more. You observe less and judge more. Every deviation becomes evidence of disappointment rather than information about reality. Buddhism invites you to drop expectation, not to lower standards, but to see clearly. When you stop expecting people to behave according to your inner script, you begin to meet them as they are, not as you wish them to be. This does not mean you tolerate harm or abandon discernment. It means you stop confusing fantasy with truth. Expectation is future-oriented. It pulls the mind away from the present moment and into anticipation. You wait for texts, you wait for changes, you wait for closure. While waiting, you are not living. You are negotiating with an imagined future. Buddhism teaches that peace exists only in the present, because the present is the only place where reality actually happens. When you stop caring about how things should unfold, your mind returns to what is unfolding. This shift is subtle but powerful. You become less reactive. You take things less personally. You stop assigning meaning prematurely. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin asking, "What is happening right now?" This is where healing begins. Without expectation, events lose their emotional charge faster. Words land and pass. Behaviors are noticed without becoming wounds. You still feel, but you no longer spiral. The mind becomes flexible instead of rigid. Buddhism values this flexibility because it aligns with impermanence rather than fighting it. Expectation also fuels resentment. When you expect, you keep score. You remember what you gave and what you did not receive. You replay moments, searching for fairness. Buddhism considers this mental bookkeeping a form of self-inflicted suffering. The mind clings to the past, rehearsing grievances that cannot be corrected, while the body carries the weight of unresolved emotion. Letting go of expectation does not mean you stop caring about outcomes entirely. It means you stop tying your inner peace to them. You act with intention, kindness, and integrity, but you release the demand that life reward you in a specific way. This is emotional maturity in Buddhist terms. When expectation dissolves, gratitude becomes possible. You appreciate what is offered instead of resenting what is missing. You recognize effort without demanding perfection. You experience moments fully without turning them into promises about the future. This does not make you naive. It makes you grounded. The moment you stop caring about how things should have gone, you stop reliving disappointment. The moment you stop expecting people to fulfill roles they never agreed to play, you stop feeling personally wounded by their limitations. You begin to understand that most people are not betraying you. They are simply being themselves. Buddhism teaches that freedom comes from aligning with reality, not reshaping it through expectation. When you accept that change is inevitable and uncertainty is natural, disappointment loses its grip. You no longer collapse when things unfold differently. You adjust, you learn, you move forward. Healing is not about getting what you expected. It is about releasing the expectation that you needed it in the first place. When expectation ends, clarity begins. When clarity begins, peace follows. 3. Non-attachment is not indifference. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they hear Buddhist teachings on non-attachment is assuming it means not caring at all. They imagine emotional withdrawal, coldness, or becoming distant from life. This misunderstanding keeps many people trapped in suffering because they believe the only alternative to attachment is emotional shutdown. Buddhism does not teach indifference. It teaches clarity. Indifference is avoidance. Non-attachment is awareness. Indifference says, "I feel nothing because I am afraid to feel." Non-attachment says, "I feel fully, but I do not cling." This distinction is critical because most people swing between two extremes: emotional attachment that overwhelms them and emotional suppression that disconnects them. Both create suffering. Non-attachment occupies the middle path. When you are attached, emotions control you. A word can ruin your day. A delay can trigger anxiety. A change in tone can create stories in your mind. You do not experience emotions, you become them. Anger becomes your identity. Sadness becomes who you are. Fear becomes the lens through which you see everything. Buddhism teaches that this identification is the problem, not the emotion itself. Emotions are temporary states arising from conditions. They are not commands, they are not truths, they are not permanent features of who you are. When you attach to them, you solidify them. When you observe them, they pass. Non-attachment trains you to create space between what you feel and who you are. This space is where freedom lives. You notice anger without acting from it. You experience sadness without drowning in it. You feel joy without clinging to it or fearing its end. This does not make you passive, it makes you precise. Most suffering is not caused by emotion itself, but by resistance to emotion. You feel pain, then you panic about the pain. You feel sadness, then you judge yourself for feeling weak. You feel fear, then you try to escape it. This secondary reaction multiplies suffering. Buddhism calls this the second arrow. The first arrow is the inevitable pain of life. The second arrow is the unnecessary suffering created by attachment and resistance. Non-attachment removes the second arrow. When you stop caring in an attached way, you stop fighting your inner experience. You allow emotions to rise and fall naturally, like weather passing through the sky. The sky does not become the storm. It holds the storm and remains unchanged. This metaphor is central to Buddhist psychology. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness in which emotions appear. Indifference numbs the heart. Non-attachment opens it. When you are indifferent, you disconnect from life to protect yourself. When you are non-attached, you stay engaged without losing yourself. You listen without absorbing. You love without possessing. You care without collapsing. This is why non-attachment leads to deeper compassion, not less. When you are not consumed by your own emotional reactions, you can respond skillfully instead of impulsively. You are less reactive, less defensive, and less self-centered. You see more clearly because your vision is not distorted by emotional urgency. Consider how attachment operates in conflict. When attached, you need to be understood immediately. You need validation. You need the other person to change so you can feel better. Your response is driven by discomfort, not wisdom. Non-attachment changes this dynamic. You can pause. You can listen. You can choose silence instead of escalation. Not because you do not care, but because you care enough not to make the situation worse. This is emotional maturity in Buddhist terms. Non-attachment also protects you from emotional exhaustion. When you absorb everything, you burn out. When you carry other people's moods, problems, and reactions as your own, you lose stability. Buddhism does not ask you to stop being compassionate. It asks you to stop confusing compassion with self-sacrifice. You can support without drowning. You can empathize without merging. You can care without losing your center. The moment you stop caring in the sense of over-identifying with emotion, your nervous system relaxes, your breathing slows, your body stops interpreting every feeling as a threat. This physiological shift is part of healing. The body responds to non-attachment as safety. This is why Buddhist practice emphasizes observation. You sit, you watch the breath, you notice sensations, you let thoughts come and go. You are training the mind to witness rather than cling. Over time, this rewires how you relate to experience. You stop chasing pleasant feelings and resisting unpleasant ones. You develop equanimity, a steady balance that is not shaken by emotional extremes. Equanimity is not dullness, it is strength. People who misunderstand non-attachment often fear becoming empty. In reality, attachment is what drains you. Constantly managing emotions, expectations, and reactions consumes enormous energy. Non-attachment returns that energy to you. You become present, attentive, grounded. When you stop caring in an attached way, you do not become less human. You become more fully human. You feel deeply without being destroyed by what you feel. You remain open without being naive. You stay compassionate without being consumed. This is not emotional withdrawal, it is emotional mastery. And emotional mastery is essential for healing. Because healing does not come from avoiding emotion. It comes from learning how to experience emotion without being owned by it. 4. You suffer because you identify with the story. Most people believe they are suffering because of what happened to them. Buddhism says this is only partially true. What truly keeps suffering alive is not the event itself, but the story you built around it and then mistook for your identity. Something happened. That part is real. But the meaning you assign to it is optional. The mind does not experience events directly for long. It quickly turns them into narratives. It asks, what does this say about me? What does this mean for my future? Why did this happen to me? These questions feel natural, but they are the beginning of suffering because they transform temporary experiences into permanent conclusions. Buddhism calls this process identification. You do not just remember what happened, you become the one it happened to. They left, so I am unworthy. I failed, so I am a failure. This ended, so I am broken. These are not facts. They are stories the mind tells to create continuity and control. The problem is that once the story is formed, you begin to defend it, repeat it, and relive it. You replay conversations. You rehearse explanations. You imagine alternative endings. Each repetition strengthens the story and deepens the emotional wound. Suffering persists not because the past exists, but because the mind keeps resurrecting it. Buddhism teaches that the self you think you are is not a fixed entity, but a collection of thoughts, memories, emotions, and perceptions constantly changing. When you identify with a story, you freeze this fluid process into a rigid identity. You stop being awareness and start being a character trapped inside a narrative. This is why stories hurt. They lock you into roles: victim, betrayed, abandoned, not enough. Once the role is accepted, every new experience is filtered through it. Neutral events become evidence. Ambiguity becomes threat. Silence becomes rejection. You stop seeing reality clearly because you are no longer looking at what is happening. You are looking for confirmation of the story. Buddhism does not ask you to erase the past. It asks you to stop turning it into a definition of who you are. The moment you stop caring about preserving the story, something loosens. You realize that the story requires constant effort to maintain. It needs memory, emotion, interpretation, and imagination to survive. Without your attention, it fades. This is not avoidance. This is disidentification. Disidentification does not mean denying what happened. It means recognizing that what happened is not who you are. The event arose from conditions. Those conditions passed. The mind's attempt to preserve meaning is what keeps the suffering alive. Buddhist practice trains you to observe thoughts as events, not truths. A thought arises. You notice it. You do not argue with it. You do not follow it. You do not build a life around it. You let it pass. This is how the story loses power. Most people believe healing requires rewriting the story, finding closure, or reaching a better interpretation. Buddhism offers a more radical solution. Healing happens when you step out of the story entirely. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start noticing, "A thought about the past is arising." This shift may sound small, but it changes everything. The mind moves from immersion to observation. You are no longer inside the narrative. You are watching it unfold. This is where peace enters. Stories thrive on emotional charge. When you stop caring in an attached way, the charge weakens. The story becomes just another mental construction, no more solid than a dream. You may remember it, but it no longer defines you. You may think about it, but it no longer controls you. This does not make you detached from life. It makes you present with it. When you are not consumed by old narratives, you have attention available for what is happening now. You respond instead of react. You engage without dragging the past into every moment. Buddhism teaches that freedom is not found in fixing the past, but in ending identification with it. You cannot change what happened, but you can change your relationship to the story you tell about it. When you stop caring about defending your identity as the one who was wronged, failed, or hurt, you discover something unsettling and liberating. There is no solid self there to protect. There is awareness, experience, and choice. This realization is not intellectual, it is experiential. It comes when you notice a painful memory arise and you do not follow it. You let it exist without feeding it. You do not suppress it. You do not dramatize it. You simply watch. And in that watching, suffering loses its grip. Healing is not the story getting a better ending. Healing is realizing you were never the story to begin with. 5. Detachment returns power to the present. Most suffering survives because the mind refuses to stay where life actually happens. It drifts backward into regret or forward into anticipation, and in both directions, it loses power. Buddhism is uncompromising on this point. The past is memory, the future is imagination, and peace exists only in the present moment. Detachment is the mechanism that brings you back. Attachment keeps you mentally time-traveling. You replay what should have been said, what should have been done, how things could have turned out differently. Or you project yourself forward, rehearsing conversations that have not happened, outcomes that are not guaranteed, fears that may never arrive. In both cases, the body reacts as if the threat or loss is happening now. This is why your chest tightens, your breath shortens, and your sleep fractures. The nervous system does not know the difference between a real danger and a vividly imagined one. Buddhism does not argue with these thoughts. It asks a simpler, more disruptive question. Where are you right now? When you stop caring in the attached sense, you stop feeding the mind's addiction to time. You stop chasing closure in the past and certainty in the future. You stop demanding that memory repair you or that prediction protect you. Detachment cuts the supply line that keeps suffering alive. This is not denial, it is precision. The present moment is not a philosophical concept, it is a physiological state. When attention returns to what is actually happening, the body exits survival mode. The breath deepens, muscles release. Heart rate steadies. This is not mystical, it is biological. The present is the only moment where the body can relax because it is the only moment where action is possible. Attachment steals this moment from you. It convinces you that peace is somewhere else, in an explanation, an apology, a future outcome. Buddhism dismantles this belief relentlessly. No explanation will change the past. No outcome will permanently secure the future. The only relief available is the relief of no longer resisting what is. Detachment does not mean you stop remembering or planning. It means you stop living there. Memory becomes information instead of a prison. Planning becomes practical instead of obsessive. You use the mind as a tool, not as a place to live. This shift is where power returns to you. When you are present, you respond instead of react. You notice what is happening without immediately labeling it as a threat or a loss. You feel sensations as they arise without attaching a story to them. You hear words without instantly interpreting intent. This slows everything down, and in that slowing, choice appears. Choice is impossible when you are attached. Attachment is urgency. It demands immediate resolution. It pushes you to act from discomfort rather than clarity. Detachment removes that pressure. You can pause. You can wait. You can decide not to decide. This alone changes the quality of your life. Buddhism trains this capacity through simple but difficult practices: attention to breath, awareness of sensation, observation of thought. Each practice pulls you back from mental time travel into direct experience. You begin to notice how often suffering is not happening now but being remembered or anticipated. Seeing this clearly weakens its grip. When you stop caring about fixing the past, you stop reopening old wounds. When you stop caring about controlling the future, you stop exhausting yourself with fear. You begin to inhabit the present not as an escape, but as a ground. This is why detachment is not passive. It is stabilizing. From stability, effective action becomes possible. You speak when it matters. You move when it is useful. You rest when nothing needs to be done. You are no longer driven by the mind's constant demand for resolution. The present moment is often simple, sometimes uncomfortable, but rarely unbearable. What makes it unbearable is the mind's refusal to stay with it. Detachment corrects this refusal. It brings attention home. Healing accelerates when attention stops scattering across time. The body repairs itself when it is not constantly signaled to prepare for loss or threat. The mind clears when it is not endlessly negotiating with imagined scenarios. This is the quiet power of detachment. It does not give you answers. It gives you presence, and presence is enough. When you stop caring in the attached sense, you stop living everywhere except where you are. Power returns, not because life becomes easier, but because you are finally here to meet it. 6. Letting go is an act of compassion. Most people believe that holding on is proof of love, and that letting go is a form of betrayal. Buddhism challenges this belief at its core. It teaches that clinging is often selfish even when it feels sacrificial, and that letting go can be the most compassionate act available to you. When you hold on, you are usually holding on for yourself. You hold on to reduce your fear, to stabilize your identity, to avoid uncertainty. You tell yourself it is loyalty, patience, or commitment, but underneath it is resistance to change. Buddhism does not condemn this resistance. It simply reveals the cost. Clinging creates suffering not only for you, but for others as well. When you refuse to let go, you place silent demands on people to remain who they are no longer able or willing to be. You expect them to carry your hopes, your healing, your sense of meaning. This is an unbearable weight, even when unspoken. Letting go removes that weight. Compassion in Buddhism is not sentimental. It is clear-eyed. It sees that forcing connection when conditions have changed creates resentment, guilt, and exhaustion on both sides. Letting go acknowledges reality without hostility. It says, "I release you from the role I assigned you, and I release myself from the need to be fulfilled through you." This is not abandonment, it is respect. You cannot love someone and simultaneously try to control the direction of their life. You cannot claim compassion while demanding they soothe your fears. True compassion allows others to change without punishment. It allows separation without hatred. Buddhism recognizes that suffering increases when love turns into obligation. When you stay attached out of fear, you begin to suppress truth. You avoid difficult conversations. You tolerate what harms you. You sacrifice clarity for the illusion of harmony. This is not kindness. It is avoidance. Letting go restores honesty. It allows you to stop pretending that things are working when they are not. It allows you to stop negotiating with your own boundaries. It allows both parties to meet reality instead of maintaining appearances. This honesty, though painful at first, reduces long-term suffering. Compassion also applies inward. Many people cling not to others, but to their own pain. They replay stories, rehearse grievances, and protect wounds as if letting go would invalidate what they endured. Buddhism teaches that compassion for yourself includes the willingness to stop reopening injuries. You do not dishonor your pain by releasing it. You honor your life. Letting go does not erase what happened. It simply refuses to let the past dictate the present. It allows healing to proceed without constant interruption. This is an act of care toward your own nervous system, your own capacity to rest and recover. Buddhist compassion does not mean endless tolerance. It means appropriate response. Sometimes the most compassionate response is distance. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is ending what cannot be repaired. Compassion does not guarantee closeness. It guarantees sincerity. When you stop caring in an attached way, you stop confusing endurance with virtue. You stop believing that suffering is proof of depth. You stop equating self-neglect with love. Instead, you act from clarity rather than guilt. This clarity changes how you relate to others. You listen without trying to fix. You support without overfunctioning. You offer presence without taking responsibility for outcomes you cannot control. This makes your compassion sustainable instead of draining. Letting go also dissolves resentment. When you release your grip, you release the expectation that someone owes you something. You stop waiting for them to compensate you for your investment. This does not mean what you gave was wrong. It means you accept that giving does not entitle you to a specific return. This acceptance is freedom. Buddhism teaches that clinging to people or situations long past their natural course creates suffering because it ignores impermanence. Letting go aligns you with the truth of change. Alignment reduces friction. Reduced friction reduces pain. When you let go with understanding rather than bitterness, you do not close your heart, you refine it. You learn where love ends and attachment begins. You learn that compassion does not require self-erasure. Healing deepens when you stop holding on out of fear and start releasing out of wisdom. Letting go is not giving up. It is giving permission for life to move as it must. And that permission is one of the purest forms of compassion there is. 7. Peace comes from acceptance, not control. At the deepest level, suffering persists because of one belief that rarely gets questioned, the belief that you should be able to control life if you try hard enough. Buddhism dismantles this belief without compromise. It teaches that the need for control is not strength but fear, and that peace does not arrive when life finally obeys you, but when you stop demanding that it do so. Control feels comforting because it promises safety. If you can manage outcomes, predict behavior, or secure certainty, then nothing can hurt you. This logic is seductive and false. Life is not designed to be controlled. People are not systems that respond consistently to effort. Conditions change constantly, often without warning. When you base your peace on control, you guarantee instability. Buddhism names this clearly. Wanting life to be other than it is creates dukkha, suffering. The mind resists uncertainty and tries to replace it with control. It plans excessively, monitors constantly, and reacts aggressively to deviation. This creates tension, not peace. Acceptance is not resignation, it is accuracy. To accept is to see reality clearly without insisting it meet your preferences. Acceptance does not mean you approve of everything that happens. It means you stop arguing with facts. You acknowledge what is present before deciding how to respond. This single shift removes enormous psychological friction. When you stop caring in the attached sense, you stop trying to manage outcomes you cannot govern. You recognize the limits of your influence. You act where action is possible and release where it is not. This distinction is essential. Control tries to dominate everything. Acceptance chooses its battles. Most emotional exhaustion comes from fighting what cannot be changed. You try to change people who do not want to change. You try to force closure where none is available. You try to secure permanence in a world defined by impermanence. Buddhism does not shame this struggle. It simply shows its futility. The moment you accept uncertainty, your body relaxes. The constant vigilance eases. You stop scanning for threats and start responding to what actually appears. Acceptance signals safety to the nervous system because it ends the internal war. Peace is not the absence of difficulty, it is the absence of resistance to difficulty. Control also narrows perception. When you are obsessed with a specific outcome, you miss alternative possibilities. You interpret every deviation as failure. Acceptance widens perception. It allows you to adapt, to learn, to pivot without collapse. This flexibility is a form of intelligence. Buddhism teaches that wisdom is the ability to respond appropriately to changing conditions. Control assumes conditions should not change. Acceptance recognizes that change is the condition. When you accept, you stop personalizing events. You stop interpreting change as punishment or proof of inadequacy. You understand that most events arise from countless causes beyond your reach. This understanding reduces self-blame and resentment simultaneously. Acceptance also restores dignity. You no longer beg reality to spare you. You meet it upright, without hostility or desperation. You stop pleading for certainty and start cultivating resilience. Letting go of control does not mean passivity. It means acting from clarity instead of fear. You still make decisions. You still set boundaries. You still pursue what matters. But you do so without demanding guarantees. You move without gripping. This is the paradox Buddhism points to repeatedly. The more you accept, the less you suffer. The less you suffer, the clearer you see. The clearer you see, the more skillfully you act. Peace is not something you achieve by mastering life. It is something that emerges when you stop trying to dominate it. When you stop caring about forcing outcomes, you stop being at war with existence. You align with reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. In that alignment, resistance dissolves. Healing completes itself, not through effort, but through surrender to truth. Acceptance is not weakness, it is the final strength. And when control ends, peace begins. The moment you stop caring is not the moment you lose your humanity. It is the moment you stop confusing suffering with depth and attachment with love. Buddhism does not ask you to become distant from life. It asks you to stop clinging to it in ways that hurt you. Throughout these lessons, one truth keeps returning in different forms. Pain is unavoidable, but prolonged suffering is optional. Suffering continues only when you resist impermanence, when you demand certainty from uncertainty, and when you build your identity around what cannot stay. When you stop caring in the attached sense, you reclaim your energy. You stop feeding stories that keep you trapped. You stop expecting reality to compensate you for what you gave. You stop trying to control people, outcomes, and time itself. In doing so, you return to the present, the only place where healing is possible. This does not make you cold. It makes you clear. You still feel, but you no longer collapse. You still care, but you no longer bleed. You still love, but you no longer lose yourself in the process. Buddhism teaches that freedom is not found by acquiring more, fixing more, or holding on longer. Freedom is found by releasing what was never meant to be owned. When you let go of attachment, expectation, and control, peace is no longer something you chase. It becomes something that remains. Healing does not arrive dramatically. It arrives quietly when you stop fighting reality and start understanding it. When you stop caring about forcing life to obey your desires, life stops wounding you through resistance. You do not heal by hardening your heart. You heal by loosening your grip. And that is the moment peace begins.